saw me undressed. Now you must marry me." The Apache girl's shocking ultimatum to a lone cowboy. The sun was already leaning low in the sky when Eli Mercer realized he had gone too far from the trail. He slowed his horse and looked around, trying to recognize something familiar, but all he saw were tall rocks, dry land, and the endless open space of the desert. The air was warm, heavy with dust, and the smell of wild grass. Eli had been riding since early morning, following the tracks of a lost calf that had wandered away from the herd. What should have taken an hour had turned into an all-day chase. Eli was used to being alone. He had spent most of his life that way. He worked for ranches, never stayed long, and never got too close to people. The open land was his home, and silence was his friend. Still, even he knew this place felt different. The land seemed to watch him. The rocks stood like silent guards. The wind moved carefully, as if it carried secrets. He wiped his face with his sleeve and decided to find water before the light faded. His horse was tired, and so was he. Ahead, between two rocky hills, he noticed a line of green trees. Green meant water. Hope lifted in his chest, and he guided his horse toward it. As he got closer, he heard the soft sound of water moving. It was a small river, hidden like a secret from the rest of the land. The water sparkled in the fading sunlight, and the air felt cooler. Eli dismounted, letting his horse drink first. He knelt down to wash his hands and face, feeling relief spread through his body. That was when he heard movement behind him. At first, he thought it was an animal. He turned his head slightly, just enough to look, and then he froze. Not far from him, near the edge of the river, stood a young Apache woman. She was clearly grown, her posture strong and proud, her long dark hair falling over her shoulders. She was bathing, unaware that anyone else was there. The moment their eyes met, time seemed to stop. Shock filled both their faces. Eli's heart slammed in his chest. He stood up quickly and turned away, his face burning with shame.
"I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough with panic.
"I didn't know anyone was here. I swear I didn't mean no harm." Behind him there was a sharp gasp, the sound of water moving fast, and then silence. Eli stayed facing the trees, not daring to turn back. He felt like the ground might open up and swallow him. He had traveled through many lands before, but he knew enough to understand that some places were not meant to be crossed. Some moments were not meant to happen. After a few seconds that felt like a lifetime, he heard footsteps running away, light and fast. He finally turned, but the woman was gone. The river looked calm again, like nothing had happened at all. Eli stood there, breathing hard, his mind racing. He felt like he had stepped into something much bigger than himself. He had no idea who she was, or what rules he had broken, but his chest felt tight with fear and regret. He quickly gathered his things, mounted his horse, and backed away from the river, speaking softly to the animal to keep it calm. He didn't know that the land he stood on belonged to the Apache people. He didn't know the river was sacred. And he didn't know that by accident he had crossed a line that could not be undone. As he rode away, the sky turned orange and red, the sun sinking fast. Eli pushed his horse harder, wanting to get back to open land before darkness fell. But no matter how fast he rode, he could not shake the feeling that he was being followed. The wind felt different now, colder. Every sound made him tense. He camped that night under a group of trees lighting a small fire. He ate in silence, his eyes always moving, watching the shadows. The memory of the woman's shocked face stayed in his mind. There was no anger in her eyes, only surprise, and something deeper, something like fear, mixed with duty. Eli lay down but did not sleep much. He dreamed of water and fire, of eyes watching from the dark, of voices he could not understand. When morning came, he packed quickly and mounted his horse. He planned to ride straight back to the ranch and forget the whole thing. Some mistakes were better left behind, but as he took only a few steps forward, a shadow moved across the ground in front of him. "Stop!" The voice was calm but firm. Eli's hand slowly moved away from the reins. He lifted his eyes and saw them, Apache warriors appearing from the rocks and trees as if the land itself had brought them forth. There were 6 of them, all armed, all silent, their eyes steady and serious. Eli swallowed hard. He knew better than to run. He slowly raised his hands. "I mean no trouble," he said carefully. "I was just passing through." One of the men stepped forward. He was older, his face lined with years of sun and battle. "You crossed where you should not," the man said. "You saw what was not meant for your eyes." Eli felt his stomach drop. Oh, they knew. He nodded slowly. "It was an accident. I swear it." I turned away. The man studied him for a long moment. "Accident or not, the rule is the same," he said. Before Eli could ask what that meant, 2 of the warriors moved closer. They did not touch him, but their presence made it clear he was not leaving on his own. Eli's horse shifted nervously, sensing the tension. Eli took one last look at the open land behind him, the freedom he had always known, and realized it was already gone. They led him through the hills, deeper into the land. The journey was long and silent. No one spoke to him, but he felt their eyes on him the entire time. His mind raced with fear, questions, and regret. He did not know what would happen to him, only that his life had changed the moment he reached that river.
As they walked, Eli remembered something his father once told him when he was a boy. The land remembers everything.
And when you take something you don't understand, it takes something from you in return. Eli finally understood what those words meant. In the distance, he saw smoke rising. The Apache camp came into view. Tents, fires, children running, women working, men standing guard. Life moved calmly there, as if nothing was wrong. But the moment Eli entered the camp, everything changed. People stopped and stared. Whispers moved like wind through the tents. Eli stood in the middle of the Apache camp, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes on him. The air smelled of smoke, cooked food, and dry earth. Children had stopped playing. Women paused their work. Men stood still, watching him like he was a storm that had wandered into their peaceful day. No one shouted. No one rushed forward. The silence was heavier than anger. 2 warriors stood behind Eli, making sure he did not move. His horse had been taken away. For the first time in many years, Eli felt truly trapped. He had crossed dangerous lands before, faced wild animals and bad men, but this was different. This was not about strength or speed. This was about something he did not understand. The older man who had spoken earlier stepped into the center. His presence alone made the camp quiet again. He was tall, his hair streaked with gray, his eyes sharp like they could see straight through a person. He looked at Eli for a long time before speaking. "You are the man from the river," he said calmly. Eli nodded. "Yes, sir. You saw my daughter." The words hit Eli like a stone. His mouth went dry. He looked down at the ground. "I turned away," he said quickly. "I swear on my life, I did not mean to disrespect her. I did not even know this was your land." The man did not raise his voice, but his words were heavy with meaning. Not knowing does not erase what happened. Eli felt his chest tighten. He wanted to explain, to make them understand, but he could see it would not matter. Rules were rules, and he had broken one. The man lifted his hand and a woman stepped forward. Eli recognized her immediately. It was the same young woman from the river. She was wrapped in a thick blanket now, her long hair braided. Her face was calm, but her eyes were strong, steady, and full of something Eli could not name. This was Nalinya. She stood beside her father, her back straight, her chin lifted. She did not look away from Eli, not even once. "You know what this means," the father said to her. Nalinya nodded slowly. "Yes, father." Eli's heart beat faster. "Sir," he said carefully, "I don't understand what's happening. If there is a fine I must pay, or work I must do, I will do it. I just want to make things right." The man looked at him again. "There is only one way to make this right." The camp went completely silent. "You will marry my daughter." For a moment, Eli thought he had heard wrong. The words did not make sense. He stared at the man, then at Nalinya, then back again. "Marry?" he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Nalinya did not look surprised. She had known this was coming. Eli's mind raced. He was a stranger here.
A cowboy. A man who slept under the stars and never stayed in one place.
He had never even thought of marriage, not once in all his wandering life. And now, in a place he did not belong, with a woman he had only seen for a few seconds, he was being told his life would change forever. I can't," Eli said, shaking his head slowly. "I don't even know her. She doesn't know me." Nalinya's eyes flashed, not with anger but with pride. She stepped forward and spoke for the first time. Her voice was calm, but strong. "This is not about knowing. This is about honor."
Eli swallowed.
"I meant no harm to you," he said to her. "I swear it." "I know," she replied, "but the rule still stands."
Her father lifted his hand again.
"You have two choices," he said. "You accept this and live, or you refuse and face the punishment of our law." Eli did not need to ask what that meant. He could see it in the eyes of the warriors around him. This was not a threat spoken in anger. This was a fact spoken in calm. Eli looked at Nalinya again. She stood tall, not begging, not pleading. This was her fate too, and she accepted it without fear. That, more than anything, shook him. His life before this moment flashed through his mind. Endless trails, lonely nights, empty towns, and freedom that often felt more like emptiness. He had nothing waiting for him back there, no family, no place that truly belonged to him. He took a deep breath. "If I say yes," he asked, "what happens?" "You stay," the father said. "You become part of this camp. You protect her. You honor her. You learn our ways." Eli nodded slowly. His voice was steady when he spoke, though his heart was not. "Then I will do it." A low murmur moved through the camp. Some faces showed surprise. Others showed approval. Nalinya finally lowered her eyes, just for a moment, and Eli felt something shift inside him, a strange mix of fear and respect. The ceremony was prepared quickly. Not like the weddings Eli had seen in towns with music and laughter, but something quieter, deeper. Elders gathered. A fire was lit. Words were spoken in a language Eli did not understand, but he felt their meaning in the air. He stood beside Nalinya feeling awkward and out of place, but also strangely calm. When the ceremony ended, it was done. No turning back. No undoing it. That night, Eli was given a small shelter near Nalinya's family. He sat alone inside, staring at the firelight dancing on the walls. Everything had happened so fast. In one day, he had lost his freedom and gained a wife. Outside, he could hear the camp settling into sleep. Laughter, soft voices. Life continuing as if nothing unusual had happened. Nalinya did not come to him that night. She stayed with her family. That was the custom, he was told. Eli was grateful for the space. His mind was too full for sleep anyway. He lay awake, listening to the wind, wondering what kind of man he would have to become now. When morning came, Nalinya stood outside his shelter, waiting. "We will learn each other slowly," she said. "This was not your choice. It was not mine either, but we will not let it become a punishment." Eli nodded, feeling something warm and heavy settle in his chest. "I will not shame you," he said. She studied him for a long moment, then gave a small nod. "Then we begin." The days after the marriage felt strange and heavy for both of them. Eli woke up every morning not knowing what he was supposed to do, where he belonged, or how people truly saw him. He was no longer a free cowboy riding wherever he wanted, but he was not fully part of the Apache camp either. He was something in between, a man standing on a thin line trying not to fall. Nalinya moved through the camp with quiet strength. She did not avoid Eli, but she did not rush toward him either. She spoke when needed, and when she did, her words were clear and calm. She showed him where he could sit, where he could get water, and which areas he should not enter. Everything had rules here, and Ellie was slowly learning that breaking them was never a small thing. At first, the people watched him closely. Children whispered when he passed. Some men looked at him with cold eyes. A few women nodded politely but kept their distance. Eli understood why. He was an outsider who had entered their lives in the wrong way, and trust was not something given easily. Each day he tried to make himself useful. He helped carry water, cut wood, and repair small things around the camp. He worked quietly, never complaining. He wanted them to see that he respected their land and their ways. Slowly, the stares softened. A few men began to speak to him, short sentences at first, then longer ones. They showed him how to tie certain knots, how to move quietly, how to listen to the land. Nalinya watched all of this from a distance. At night, they sat near the fire, not too close, not too far. Sometimes they spoke about small things, the weather, the day, the children running through the camp. Other nights they sat in silence, listening to the crackle of the flames. The silence was not empty. It was full of questions neither of them was ready to ask. One evening, Ellie finally spoke what had been heavy on his heart. "Do you hate me?" he asked softly, staring into the fire. Nalinya did not answer right away. She poked the fire with a stick, watching sparks rise into the dark sky. "No," she said at last. "I do not hate you." "Then what do you feel?" Eli asked. She looked at him then, her eyes steady. "I feel like the river changed its path without asking me. I must learn how to live with the new way it flows." Eli nodded. He understood that feeling more than he wanted to admit. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, something began to change. Nalinya started showing Eli more about her world. She taught him which plants were good for food and which were for healing. She told him stories of her people, stories of survival, loss, and strength. Eli listened carefully, never interrupting. He began to see her not as a rule or a duty, but as a person with a deep and steady heart. One afternoon, while they were walking near the edge of the camp, Nalinya stopped and pointed toward the hills. "That is where I used to go when I was a child," she said, "when I wanted to be alone." Eli smiled softly. "I used to ride there too," he said, "when I wanted to forget the world." She looked at him with surprise. Then a small smile touched her lips. It was the first time Eli had seen her smile like that. Not polite, not careful, but real. In that moment, something warm moved between them, something quiet and new. But peace never lasts long when two worlds are trying to become one. One morning, a rider arrived at the camp, breathing hard, his horse covered in dust. The elders gathered quickly. Eli watched from a distance as faces grew serious. He felt the change in the air before anyone spoke. Soldiers had been seen near the land. The camp became busy. Men prepared weapons. Women gathered supplies. Children were told to stay close. Nalinya's calm face tightened just slightly, but Eli noticed. That night she came to him and sat closer than before. "If they come," she said quietly, "they will not see you as one of us." Eli felt a cold weight settle in his chest. "I know. You could leave," she said. "Before trouble starts. No one would stop you." Eli looked at the fire, then at her. "Would you want me to?" Nalinya was silent for a long moment. Then she shook her head. "No. But wanting does not change danger." Eli thought about the open land, the freedom he once had. He could ride away before dawn and never look back. No one would chase him. No one would blame him. But then he looked at Nalinya, the woman who had been forced into this bond just like him, who had stood strong every day, who had shown him her world without fear.
"I'm not leaving," he said. Nalinya's eyes softened.
She nodded once, slowly, as if she had expected nothing less. The next day, the camp moved. They packed quickly and quietly, heading deeper into the hills. Eli helped without being asked. No one questioned him now. He was part of the movement, part of the effort to protect the people and the land. That night, as they rested, Nalinya sat beside him and spoke in a low voice. "When I first saw you at the river, I thought my life was over." Eli looked at her, surprised. "So did I," he said honestly. She gave a small, sad smile. But maybe it was only beginning. Eli did not answer, but his heart beat harder. For the first time since the river, he felt something close to hope. They sat together under the stars, two strangers, no longer two lives, slowly learning to walk in the same direction. The world around them was still uncertain, still dangerous, but something had changed between them. Not because of rules, not because of fear, but because of choice. The camp had not fully settled before the danger came closer. The hills around them felt tighter now, like the land itself was holding its breath. Eli noticed it in the way people spoke less and listened more. Fires were kept small, children were told to stay near their mothers. Even the wind seemed careful, as if it did not want to carry sound too far. Eli walked through the camp each day, helping wherever he could. He carried water, fixed broken tools, and stood guard when asked. No one treated him like a stranger anymore, but he could feel the quiet test in every look. This was the moment when a man proved who he truly was. He knew that. And he knew the choice he had made would soon be tested. Nalinya stayed close to him now, not because she was afraid, but because this was what families did. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they didn't. Their silence had become comfortable, like the quiet between two people who no longer needed to explain themselves. One evening, an elder came to Eli and placed a hand on his shoulder. "If trouble comes," the old man said, "you must choose where you stand. Not with words, but with actions." Eli nodded. "I understand." That night he did not sleep. He sat near the edge of the camp, watching the dark hills. Memories of his old life came back, riding alone, sleeping under the stars, answering to no one. It would have been easy to leave, too easy, but easy was no longer right. Just before sunrise, a sharp cry cut through the silence. Scouts had seen movement in the distance. The camp came alive in seconds. Men grabbed weapons. Women gathered the children. Elders moved to the center, calm but alert. Eli stood up and moved without thinking, taking his place beside the men. Nalinja's hand caught his arm. "Be careful," she said. Eli looked at her, really looked at her, and nodded. "I will." The scouts returned with news that soldiers were moving toward the hills. Not close yet, but close enough. The leaders spoke quickly, deciding the camp must move again, deeper into the land where the narrow paths would protect them. The journey was hard. The land rose sharply, filled with rocks and steep trails. Children struggled. The elders leaned on sticks. Eli helped carry a small boy who had fallen behind. His arms burned, but he did not stop. Suddenly a sound echoed from behind, a shout, sharp and loud. Everyone froze. They had been seen. The leaders gave quick orders. The people moved faster now, fear pushing them forward. Eli stayed near the back with a few other men, watching the trail. Dust rose in the distance. The soldiers were closer than they thought. Then the first loud crack broke the air. Eli's heart slammed in his chest. He had heard that sound before. He knew what it meant. But this time, he was not running from it. He was standing in its path. The men around him moved into position, using rocks and trees for cover. Eli followed them, his hands shaking, but his mind clear. He wasn't thinking like a cowboy anymore. He was thinking like someone who had something to protect. Nolinya's face flashed in his mind, her steady eyes, her quiet strength. The camp behind him, the people who had slowly accepted him. He could not let harm reach them. The soldiers moved closer, shouting commands that echoed through the hills. Eli could see them now. Shapes moving between rocks, unaware of how narrow the path had become. Time slowed. The world narrowed to breath, stone, and sound. When the moment came, Eli acted without thinking. He shouted a warning to the men beside him, then rolled a large rock down the path. It crashed into the trail, blocking the way. More rocks followed. Dust filled the air. Shouts turned into confusion. The soldiers stopped, unsure how many people were ahead of them. That pause was enough. The Apache men moved quickly, guiding the people to safety while the soldiers tried to find another path. The hills swallowed the camp like a secret, just as the river once had. When it was over, the land was quiet again. Too quiet. Eli's legs shook as he leaned against a rock. His hands were cut and bleeding, but he didn't feel it. He only felt the pounding of his heart and the heavy truth of what he had done. He had chosen his side. Hours later, the camp gathered in a hidden valley. The people were safe. The children were quiet, tired but unharmed. Fires were lit carefully, low and hidden. Nalinya found Eli sitting alone near a tree. Without speaking, she sat beside him. For a long time, neither of them said a word. Then she placed her hand over his, gentle and warm. "You stayed," she said. Eli looked at her, his eyes tired but steady.
There was nowhere else to go.
She shook her head.
There was.
"You just didn't choose it." The weight of her words settled deep inside him. He realized something then, that the man he used to be, the lone cowboy who belonged nowhere, was gone. In his place was someone new. Someone who belonged to this land, these people, this woman. The elders gathered later that night. One of them spoke to Eli. "Today, you became one of us," the man said simply. Eli felt something tighten in his chest. He nodded, unable to speak. That night, as the camp slept, Eli and Nalinya sat together under the stars. For the first time, the space between them felt gone. The bond that began with a mistake had become something real, something earned. The danger had not fully passed, and the world was still uncertain. But one truth was clear now. Eli was no longer a man caught between two lives. He had chosen one. The valley stayed quiet for many days after the soldiers turned back. The land slowly released its tension, like a deep breath finally let out. Birds returned to the trees, and the wind no longer felt sharp. Life, careful and slow, began to move forward again. Ellie woke each morning to the sound of the camp coming alive. Children laughed softly. Women prepared food. Men checked the land and the trails. Nothing felt rushed anymore. The danger had passed, at least for now, but the memory of it stayed, reminding everyone how close they had come to losing everything. Eli felt different now. When he walked through the camp, people greeted him with quiet respect. He was no longer watched. He was no longer tested. He was trusted. That change was heavier than any weapon he had ever carried. Naliana walked beside him openly now. There was no distance between them, no unspoken rules keeping them apart. When they spoke, their words were easier, warmer. Sometimes they laughed. Sometimes they simply shared silence, watching the sun rise or set over the hills. One evening they walked to the edge of the valley, where the land opened wide and the sky stretched endlessly. It reminded Eli of his old life, the endless trails and lonely sunsets. "You miss it," Nalinya said gently. Eli thought for a moment, then shook his head. "I miss who I thought I was," he said, "but not who I really was." Nalinya smiled, the kind of smile that came from understanding. "The land changes us," she said. "If we listen." Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Eli learned more of the Apache ways. He learned how to read the land, how to move with it instead of against it. He learned when to speak and when silence was stronger. He learned that strength did not always mean force. Sometimes it meant patience. Nalinya, too, changed. She began to share her dreams with him, things she had never spoken aloud before. She wanted to help her people heal, to teach children the old stories so they would not be forgotten. Eli listened, and for the first time in his life he wanted to stay long enough to see something grow. One morning, an elder called Eli to sit beside him. "You were given a choice once," the old man said. "You could have left." Eli nodded.
"I know. You stayed," the elder continued. Not because you were forced, but because you chose to belong. Eli lowered his head, humbled.
This land gave me more than I ever gave it, he said. The elder smiled. Then the land will keep you. That night the camp gathered for a quiet celebration. There was food, music, and stories told by firelight. It was not loud or wild, but it was full of warmth. Laughter moved easily through the air. Children played. Elders smiled. It was a night of peace, the kind that feels earned. Eli and Nalanya sat together, their shoulders touching. When the fire burned low and the stars filled the sky, Nalanya spoke softly. "Do you remember the river?" she asked. Eli nodded. "I think about it often." "So do I," she said. "It took something from us, but it also gave us something we never expected." Eli looked at her, his eyes steady. "A new life," he said. She nodded. Years passed. The story of the lone cowboy who crossed into Apache land did not fade. It became a quiet legend, told around fires on long nights. Not a story of anger or punishment, but of change. Of a man who lost one life to find another. Of a woman who turned duty into strength. Of two people who began as strangers and became partners. Eli never returned to the ranches or the old trails. He built a home in the valley, one that stood strong through storms and seasons. Children grew there, some who called him father, some who called him uncle, all who knew him as family. Sometimes at sunset, Eli would stand on a hill and watch the land stretch endlessly before him. He would think of the man he used to be, riding alone, believing freedom meant having no ties. Now he knew better. Freedom was choosing where you belonged and staying. Nalanya would stand beside him, her hand in his, both of them watching the land that had changed their lives forever. The river still flowed somewhere beyond the hills, quiet and steady, carrying their story forward, one gentle turn at a time.